Hey Lindsay, how's it going?
Hi. Good, good. How are you?
Awesome. I'm good, thank you. I'm very good. I'm excited about today's topic, talking
Mm,
about self-compassion. And this has been a massive journey for me personally, and also,
mm.
the journey that I see clients take when they finally twig what self-compassion is. It's a big one in psychology.
It is a big one, and I also feel it's a term that's become really overused in just
Mm,
in media, and I think it's almost taken on a slightly different meaning than we might mean about it in a clinical setting. And I think that that can sometimes taint people's perception of what is meant by it or what it is. So yeah, I'm really pleased that we're being able to give it some time today.
yeah. So what is self-compassion?
Good question. And I think sometimes you want to answer that with almost what is it not?
Mm,
And I think that's the stuff that often comes up for people. I think it's often become blurred with is it just soft and fluffy? Is it about, being self-indulgent or being selfish or being weak? And I think it belies just how much strength it takes to truly be self-compassionate in the way that
mm,
we mean it in a more of a therapeutic setting. So what we would think of as true self-compassionate behavior might actually involve having some really difficult conversations, saying no to things that we may have wanted to do but no longer serve us, or relationships that are important for us to step away from this very I guess from a wise system, that sort of that inherent system within us, so that we're
mm.
thinking about how to alleviate the suffering that we might be experiencing.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, often it comes up in the context of it can be experienced as quite a feminine word, quite a soft female quality. And actually, one of the people that's written a lot or is big in the compassion focused therapy world, Russell Coates, did a lot of work with men in prisons, and actually
Mm,
they found that the language, the term compassion or self compassion, elicited a lot of barriers for people, and so they reframed it as true strength, which I do feel is not just relevant to males, but actually thinking about anyone
mm.
who is thinking about what do we really mean about it. And I think it often is about embodying a real a quality of true strength, a quality of real determination to be able to have sometimes these quite difficult decisions that we need to make for ourselves.
I like to think of it as well as taking the tough decisions or making the hard moves to align your
Mhm.
life closer to your value system.
Mhm.
And kind of that's not always easy to do. And it can really it can shift quite a lot of our life if we live our life more in alignment with that. Um, but I think a lot of people, when I think about my clients and what they say about self-compassion, it's like, oh, if I'm going to do that, I'm just going to like let myself be complacent. It
Mhm.
feels weak. It doesn't feel natural. I don't
Mhm.
deserve it. In this particular instance, I don't deserve compassion. I need to give myself an uppercut to keep going.
Mhm.
And it's all this kind of tough language of where we think we need to be intrinsically motivated by giving ourselves the proverbial stick.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, what are your thoughts around motivation and how it kind of aligns with being self-compassionate, particularly if we are more motivated by the stick than by the carrot? Like, how does all this sort of tie in together?
In a lot of societies, we are geared towards noticing when things haven't been right. When do we need to, and like you say, the language, you need to pull your socks up, you need to rocket up your bum, kick up all of
Mm,
that language. We are so habituated to noticing when things are wrong or where the errors are. We receive a lot of critical language. And so I think it's not surprising that we then mirror that in ourselves. And I think that the motivation to sit and operate from perhaps quite a different lens than we might be used to can feel really unfamiliar. And I think often what feels unfamiliar can feel quite uncomfortable,
mm,
even more so if we're not used to receiving compassion from others. How do we know then what it might feel like to give it to ourselves? So it
mm,
brings on, I guess we can talk about compassion as having three different flows. So we can give compassion to other people, and this is from compassion focused therapy, Paul Gilbert. We can give compassion to other people, we can receive compassion from other people, and the third flow is that we can give it to ourselves. And I think for our listeners to think about which of those do we most readily lean into, because often some of those feel more comfortable than others. So sometimes people are very skilled or practiced in showing compassion to other people, sometimes at the expense of their own well-being and their own health or boundaries. And receiving compassion can feel difficult, particularly if we've not grown up in an environment where we've had a lot of that and that's felt safe. For people who maybe have trauma histories, where receiving compassion has sometimes then been followed up with some sort of violation of the trust in some way, that actually you can get the fusing of receiving compassion with actually feeling quite unsafe. So I think it's interesting to think about each of us, what feels more familiar, what are we more used to? And then coming back to this idea of motivation, what is our motivation to show ourselves compassion in a different way? And I would agree wholeheartedly with you that aligning that to our values, using that as our anchor or our guiding star to think about, if I were to live my life in accordance with my values, what would that look like? That's often a great guide for thinking about then what is the behavior that's compassionate towards myself. And then when we're living in our values and being self-compassionate and looking after ourselves, that's often better for anyone that's in our orbit. Even though when we make that change, the ripples can feel quite a shift for others and for ourselves, which, change is never easy.
No. And I think
everyone would have done it.
Everyone would have done it. Yeah. But I think if you're in a horrible place where it feels so far away from you, to be able to be self-compassionate. I mean, what I find, the work of Nathanson is quite interesting because, he talks about that kind of compass of shame. And shame is often the emotion that really anchors us so far away from self-compassion, in that space of I don't deserve compassion, and like it doesn't feel like something that belongs to me or something I've ever experienced. Like you said, you've never experienced it before, and then you add to that, like, you now feeling ashamed about something, it can really kind of bed in. And there are 4 kind of components of the compass of shame. So if we're feeling ashamed, we can withdraw, we can avoid, we can attack others, but the most corrosive is when we attack ourselves. And people can get really, really stuck there. So if you're in that space where you're really, really stuck in this like space of I'm attacking myself, I don't deserve compassion, I'm full of all this emotion and anxiety and hurt, and what are some of the steps that people can take to kind of start to get out of that horrible, horrible place that I think we've all experienced at some stage in life?
Just as you were talking there, before we think about the steps, what really came up for me is there are definitely times where I have noticed, clocked, that I'm speaking to myself in a way I honestly wouldn't speak to anyone else. But it's almost like that internal narration is so automatic or so habitual that I don't even notice until I stop in my track and think, I don't think I would ever say that to someone else in this situation, whatever situation it may have been. So I think part of the insidiousness of it is that we're so used to doing it, we might not even track that the compass of shame that you're talking about, that we're in that's the space that we're in. So the first step is noticing. Because I think that's a very easy thing to say, but I think when we're not in the habit of catching how we talk to ourselves, how we respond to ourselves, it takes quite a lot of focused effort to start to pause and attune and notice and check in with what is running through my mind right now. How am I responding to myself?
And I would almost say, and not just how you're responding to yourself, which system is running my nervous system at the moment, because if we think from compassion sort of work, we're thinking the threat system, the drive system, and the soothing system. And the threat system is completely automatic. Something has happened and it goes straight into overdrive. And the drive system is motivating us to kind of get to the goal that we're wanting to get to, the soothing system is not automatically online. This is really this needs space, and it needs awareness, and it needs conscious thought and activity to bring it online. So if we're in this kind of space where we're noticing how we're talking to ourselves, how do we then bring online the concept of which system is running the show at the same time? Like, how do you know? How do you know when I'm talking to myself in a really nasty way, which system is actually running this?
I guess there are no hard and fast, but if we're talking to ourselves in a really nasty way, I would imagine that is sitting within the threat system. And you're right, to move into the soothing system it's a bit like a muscle. We really need to grow it. It's not just going to suddenly hop online and do the work for us. We need to become more practice at building the neural pathways, at building the habits that help us feel more familiar in that space when we're not in threat mode, so that can become more accessible and more available to us when we are in threat mode. And it is quite an embodied experience. So I think certainly when you're talking about shame, that's often the reason why some of the more sort of cognitive approaches can be like, people can understand, like, I get it, makes sense to me, but putting it into practice, it just kind of doesn't connect. We've got this head-heart lag, and it might be, it feels unsafe, or I don't feel I deserve it. So there can be lots of barriers from that shame spiral you're talking about that keep us in the threat mode. So those 3 circles you're talking about are absolutely from compassion focused therapy as a model.
Yeah.
And I think that many of us have smaller soothing systems, and they're out of balance, and we need them all. So we do need our threat system. If I'm going to go and cross a road, and I'm crossing, just put a foot onto the crossing and a car whips around, I need that automatic threat system to detect that and help me activate really quickly and step back out of the way. So we absolutely need all 3 systems. And I think the challenge can be when they go out of balance, and when everything is sitting within, and we've got this really expanded threat system, which can get us caught into loops. So I think that, when we're in that threat mode, whatever we're picking up on or experiencing, or the situation, when it is very much from within an expanded threat system, that then creates thoughts and feelings and responses that then feed into a loop that can help us get stuck in quite a difficult or unhelpful, whatever adjective we use, but quite a challenging loop and cycle. So noticing is how we move consciously into something else.
And when you're talking about this loop, does this often involve kind of a distorted level of thinking? And actually recognizing that distortion could be helpful to flick out of the loop?
Often, I'm sure there will be examples that I can't think of right now where that's not the case, but often when we are filtering something through a lens of a threat mode or a threat system, it is by virtue going to be enhancing or exacerbating the sense of how threatening or how frightening a situation is. And so it often is distorted. But that's not to say that we then jump on the bandwagon of criticizing ourselves for having a distorted thought. It's how we can gently press pause, settle our system. So we need to settle our physiology, and then try and think about, is there a different way? Are there different thoughts that can come in so I can settle myself and approach it with a slightly more measured sense? Because the trouble with the threat system, it's so fast, it's so automatic, that we're in it without any conscious thought. So we almost need to be able to start to recognize our own body signature, our own, what happens to us, that can give us the cues to start to think, oh, wait, hang on, I can start to notice something is happening. And that then enables us to do the more conscious processes of pressing pause and trying to think about, hang on, are there other ways of looking at this? How can I take the blinkers off a little bit and start to think about, are there alternative perspectives that might also be possible?
So there's that first step of just awareness, slowing things down, awareness, understanding, okay, this is what's happening right now. How am I talking to myself? What system is active right now? Might I be kind of putting in a distorted level of thinking? What is it that is happening? And just stopping and creating some space So that seems to be quite important to activate the soothing or self-compassion system. What next? What else can people do?
So then, it's about the noticing first and then doing something. But I guess it's doing something wise, doing something that helps us. So different people will find different strategies more or less helpful, and different contexts, different situations might need different responses. So sometimes it's being able to get some of that emotion that's been activated out of our bodies. So for some people, it's going for a walk to be able to kind of clear the body a little bit of some of the built up energy that is fueling very fast thinking and lots of, thoughts. So being able to take some of that just down a few notches, allowing our body to settle. For other people, it might be almost at the other end of the spectrum, really slowing down and maybe breathing exercises and really trying to settle into our body in a very calming, doing something really mindful, which can either be more passive mindfulness in terms of a sort of a sitting and a more of a meditative quality to it, or it might be a more active mindfulness of kind of even a task as simple as the washing up, but doing it really mindfully and really just allowing ourselves to be present. And the point of that is it allows us to do that slowing down and stopping and pausing. For other people, it's connecting. So it's about re-engaging with a person or people that helps bring them back online in a different way, or doing something that connects us to our values. And that obviously will be very different for people depending on what that is. But something that helps bring us home, bring us back to a space from which we can do a bit of a reset. So what we do will depend on the person. And so some of the work is figuring out what works for us. And people may receive all sorts of suggestions. And I think it's often about trying what works for you. And it's okay if some of those strategies don't feel like they particularly access something helpful for you, and just keep trying different things until you find something that you find supports you in a helpful way,
And I
particularly in
think
those stressful moments.
And I think in those moments where we're sort of settling the body, trying to shift the internal tone of what's happening, just take the sting out of this very intense experience and just settle. I think in that moment, it's finding an anchor or something to sort of connect with your compassionate self. I mean, I have a client, she makes this motion where she does this with her own hand. She like holds her own hand in a way. And in that moment that she's doing that, it's like a little trigger for her mind to go, okay, I've got this. Like I'm holding my own hand in a way. I've got another client who she'll sort of say this little mantra. It's like, I just did my best at the time. I just did my best at the time. I didn't know. I didn't know what I know today. So just reminding herself that, at any given time, we're always only trying to do our best with what we've got. And I've got another client, he needs to sort of walk around and kind of like do that motion. So you're so right. It's so personal what actually works for us to kind of access that steadier, stronger self. But it's definitely about taking a step back from whatever the noise is from where we're at and having space to be able to engage some kind of connection with our true self, and then potentially from there start to activate that soothing system.
There's something, and they were lovely examples of all of the different ways in which this works for people. And the bit that really strikes me is the importance of repetition. So with any anchor, the more that we do it, the stronger it becomes, and the quicker it does what we hope it will do. So if someone just tries that same technique, first time it might not do much. But if you keep using that, particularly at times when you're activating your soothing system and you're not distressed, it will start to really build the strength of what that does for you, whether it's a physical anchor or a verbal anchor. Being able to practice it when things aren't difficult, so that we can then access it more readily when things are more elevated. Because I don't know if you've ever seen anyone who's tried to make a suggestion like that to someone who is fully in their threat mode, and it's not experienced as helpful. And it
So
lands,
true.
it's probably a good suggestion, but it's missed that point where someone has been able to hit pause. So that first step of being able to just slow things down and hit pause enough to engage in some sort of reconnection process that helps buy us. It's like it buys us the space to be able to then engage our thinking brain. Because I was just say, when we're activated, any of us, our thinking brain goes offline. When we're fully in threat mode, our body is all about fight or flight. Our more elevated or our more advanced thinking skills aren't online. So we need
Exactly.
to be able to slow things down enough that we can access all of our skills and our attributes in a different way.
I like to think of it a little bit like when we're in the most heightened level of threat mode. It's like a koala that has just raced up to the top of a tree,
Uh-huh.
and climbing down the branches, you have to be really careful at the top, slow, slow, one branch at a time. And the first steps very much have to be, like you said, the breathing, maybe just some walking, just trying to settle and get back into the body in some way, shape, or form. Then sort of starting to kind of access some kind of anchor or something where you're accessing, okay, there's a higher self here that has greater understanding for what is going on right now. Because that accessing of the understanding is crucial to self-compassion, because self-compassion is really about understanding the entire landscape, understanding as we stand back that what is happening, what system am I in, how am I talking to myself, noticing how am I talking to myself, how am I reacting to this moment. And we can really only respond to that inner critic in that balanced place when we've accessed this higher self in a way. So accessing this higher self seems to be quite important to be able to provide this soothing system to ourselves. We seem to be able to, like you said, easily do it for others, but providing it for ourselves is us accessing this higher version of ourselves to be able to deliver it internally.
I know some people who find that ability to be compassionate to others as a real source of inspiration of if someone else, if someone I really cared about were in this situation or had been in this experience, what would I say to them?
Yeah.
Often opens up all of those more, settled, more the sort of the wisdom and the higher self thinking that can come with that, in a way that we would struggle to access if we just thought, how can I think about this differently to
Yeah.
myself? So often bringing different perspectives. I think there's real value in generating lots of different perspectives, because often in a context we don't know, and if it's a relational issue or if someone else was involved, we don't know exactly what the other person was thinking. But often when threat mode is activated, we jump straight to a very challenging interpretation of a person's intentions or what they were trying to do or what they meant by that. And so opening up perspectives all round can help give us more options to choose from. And sometimes we do have to sit with them. Well, I don't quite know if they meant to hurt me with that or if they meant, something by it, but it's actually how we can give ourselves the scope to think, well, rather than just being one way of interpreting that, there could be 10, 12, 15 ways of interpreting that. And
Totally.
some of those others might have a very different response from me
Yeah.
if I hold those in mind.
And, for people who are concerned that being self-compassionate is somehow letting myself off the hook and I'm not going to be as motivated, and they're worried that their, intrinsic motivation needs a kind of uppercut kind of energy to it. The important thing is that the literature actually shows us that self-criticism can lead to paralysis and burnout. It's actually not predictive of high performance. So high performance actually requires this ability to bounce back. If you consider what is failure, if you're failing, and you kind of, in that failure space and we don't succeed, it's staying that kind of stuck, burned out, avoidant paralysis kind of space, which is caused by self-criticism. So what self-compassion actually does is provides accountability. It provides recovery. It's saying, look, okay, you know, it might not be your fault that you're here, but it is your responsibility now. So now we've got to take action in alignment with our values to sort of perform and get out of the situation. So I think for people that are like thinking, okay, this fluffy stuff, I'm just going to let myself off the hook, it's actually the key to high performance.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think that idea of it's not your fault and it is your responsibility to do something about it are really helpful to hold in mind. So taking accountability for something isn't the same as taking responsibility for what went wrong, or for, but it is about taking responsibility for what do I now need to do to move this situation into a better space for me and the people that I care about. And I think that separating the two can be very helpful, and not easy. It's a real skill, I think, to develop that, but also really moves us on into being able to move out of paralysis into action. And being in threat mode all the time is physiologically exhausting. It
it's
is mentally
exhausting.
exhausting. But also the drive system is a very activated system, the go, 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 do, do, do. So, there may well be people who, the thought of stopping is when all the thoughts come through and are quite difficult. So they'll just stay on the go all the time, always doing something. That is also exhausting. Now, on the surface, people may look like they're getting loads done in life, in whatever it may be, but it's really not sustainable. So this idea of having the three systems in balance, so that we are able to pick up on the threat and respond as and when we need to, that we can work towards our goals and achieve, and that we can have this restoration as well, where we can repair, when we can rest, when we can soothe the system. So we get the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system comes online, and we can then, keep the three systems in balance. So I think it almost, I think, runs counter to a lot of discourses that are out there, that sometimes actually going a bit slower is the most productive thing to do.
Totally.
Because I don't think society often rewards or praises or names that actually that's really important for long-term performance at work, in life.
And there's this idea that by being really hard and harsh and critical, this is going to make things better. But actually, creating the conditions where change is really possible is a space of true strength. It's a space of self-compassion. It's actually, bringing that wisdom online and aligning things to values, that's actually where we perform at our highest, and to your point, at a slower pace. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great kind of podcast episode for today. So stay tuned till we have our next episode, and we continue to muse all things trauma, relationships, and health. Thank you very much. Take care. The information shared on the Naked Insights podcast is for educational and information purposes only, and is not intended as a substitute for professional therapy or counseling. While we aim to provide helpful and accurate insights, individual experiences may vary. If you're experiencing trauma, mental health issues, or distress, please seek guidance from a qualified professional. The views expressed by us as the hosts are our own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or positions of any affiliated organizations.